Hi there. I'm here with Dr. Kristin Neff. She did her PhD in moral research at Berkeley, learning about self-compassion during her dissertation. As a pioneer, she conducted the first empirical studies uh, roughly 20 years ago on self-compassion. Since then, she has become a leading world researcher in self-compassion and an associate professor of educational psychology at the University of Austin, Texas. Not done yet. She is the author of 2 best-selling books, The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself and Fierce Compassion, How Women Can Harness Kindness to Speak Up, Claim Their Power, and Thrive. Along with her colleague, Dr. Chris Germer, she has developed a 9-week program in mindful self-compassion, which is taught around the globe. And she has an upcoming program that she'll share more about, which will teach us about harnessing fierce compassion. My name is Bita Bardi. I'm an educator, therapist, and journalist, and founder of A Life Worth Flourishing. I actually came across Kristin's work when I was in graduate school. I just had a baby and I was having a difficult time concentrating. And I took her program, fell in love with it. Now I actually teach it and I support my therapy clients and coaching clients, and looking to see how we can expand this program to various demographics, especially right now, to Iranians and women who are fighting a gender apartheid in their country. So little by little, there's a lot to discuss. So I would love to get to that. So thank you so much, Kristin, for taking this time to make yourself available and to want to support not only women, but also bringing your attention to the women of Iran.
Thank you, Bita. Yes, I'm happy. I'm so happy to talk to you about these issues. They're really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think self-compassion, as we'll talk about, is a really essential tool for anyone experiencing this, and as well as working to change what's happening in the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Maybe we'll just open up about that very basics in terms of, you've created tools to measure self-compassion and done extended research on the effects of it and how it brings and helps support well-being. Maybe you could just open up very basically about, the core 3 elements that are involved in self-compassion.
Yes, absolutely. So self-compassion is actually pretty intuitive. It's just turning the lens of compassion, which you might experience toward a friend, being kind, warm, supportive, present for a friend, letting them know they aren't alone. You're using that same skill, really, and it's an evolved skill of compassion, the skill of helping others. And
Yeah.
we're actually turning it inward so that we help ourselves. And as you mentioned, there are 3 core components of self-compassion, right? So one is just kindness, warmth, support, that sense of encouragement, the ability to be moved. So compassion actually in science is defined by the motivation to alleviate suffering. So
Yes.
that just caring for yourself, trying to help in some way. But in my model of compassion anyway, it's not just that warmth and kindness. There's
Yeah.
also 2 other things that are necessary. One is mindfulness, right? And actually, I learned about self-compassion when I was learning mindfulness meditation. So that I think that's probably why I need to include it, because mindfulness is the ability to pay attention to what's happening. And even if you don't want to go there, it's too uncomfortable, to actually turn toward and kind of accept that this is happening, even if you don't really like what's happening. And when it comes to pain and suffering, often we just don't want to face it. It's just too difficult. We put our head in the sands or we ignore it because it's just too much to take in, so to speak. But could you imagine if you had a friend who called you and said, hey, I'm really upset, I need to talk to you. And you're like, no, I'm too busy, or I can't deal with that. You couldn't give your friend compassion. So you need to be able to turn towards your pain, emotional or physical, or, and this pain could come from inside, like you're upset about something, a mistake you've made, or it can come from the outside, something that's happening in your life or in society. We need the mindfulness to be able to turn toward and be with that pain so that we can hold it in, warmth and care and this desire to help. And then the third element is really important, and that's a sense of common humanity, right? Realizing that we aren't alone in our suffering. Now, we know that no one's perfect and that no one leads a perfect life, but when things really difficult happen, there's this illogical sense of this kind of feeling, it's just me, as if everyone else is living a normal, perfect life, and I'm the only one who's feeling this, or who's made this mistake, or who's experiencing this terrible thing. And so this is what's different between self-compassion and self-pity. Self-pity is woe is me. Self-compassion is just recognizing, okay, everyone suffers. Yeah, not the same way, not to the same amount, of course. But there's nothing wrong or unusual about the fact that I'm suffering. And therefore, when you give yourself compassion, it's not like it's really self-focused. You're just including yourself in the larger circle of compassion. So those three elements need to be there: kindness, mindfulness, and common humanity.
Thank you. Yeah. And just reflecting back on sharing and bringing mindfulness, having that analogy of having a friend, and, if they're struggling and they're suffering, that our natural intuition is kind of respond to them. We don't just neglect, ignore.
Yes.
But sometimes it becomes harder to become aware of our own struggles, and
Yes.
tend to distract, maybe dissociate, push
Yes.
aside, toughen up.
Yeah.
What's the effect? What does the research say when we actually start responding to ourselves and reparenting in some cases when people have not experienced this growing up? What does the research actually say about self-compassion and the impact it has when we acknowledge that we are suffering and turn our attention inward rather than saying things like, oh, self-compassion is maybe for wimps, like the research, or toughen up, or be the altruistic, kind of ignore the self-care. What is I know that you've shared in your book, Love, Reading, Fierce Compassion, that you're actually a researcher.
Yes.
And a scientist. Now, it just is very interesting that you've come across a what do we call self-compassion? A
construct.
A construct. Yeah, thank you. A construct. That you share seems to be have spiritual implications, but you didn't. I think contrary to me and how my journey started, like, you are a scientific researcher. So I want to know, Kristin, what does the research say about the impact of turning in that kindness and becoming aware of our suffering and bringing attention to it?
Yeah. So it's funny. I am a scientist, and I learned about self-compassion when I was in graduate school, but I learned about it while learning mindfulness at a Buddhist group taught by, the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh. So it is a spiritual, you might say, concept or construct. But because I was actually doing research on self-esteem at the time, and realized, the problems with self-esteem, like you got to be special and above average, and it's a fair weather friend. It's there for you when you succeed, but what happens when you fail? And so what I decided to do is, well, why can't we study this? If they've studied mindfulness, we can study self-compassion. So I created a scale to measure. It was kind of the first step. And now there's over 5,000 studies, believe it or not, written studies or dissertations on self-compassion. It's a huge literature. And so we know a lot. Well, one thing we know is that it's very strongly linked to mental health.
Right.
Right. So when you're warm and you kind of acknowledge you're having a hard time and you feel connected, as opposed to like judging yourself and feeling isolated and just, not really paying attention or being lost in your suffering, you're going to be less depressed. You're going to be less anxious. You're going to experience less shame. You're going to be less likely to contemplate suicide as a way of escaping your pain, which is sometimes the ultimate way people try to escape their pain. Less likely to develop eating disorders or to develop post-traumatic stress syndrome. So if you think about it, when pain happens, when suffering happens, often it just derails us, right? We can't handle it. It's too much. And we kind of quite naturally fall into these negative spirals of depression, anxiety, or really being stressed. And so when you're able to hold your pain with compassion, kindness, care, support, not only does it reduce these negative states of mind, but it also leads to greater happiness, greater life satisfaction, more gratitude and appreciation for life, more ability to flourish. And that's because it's not like sugarcoating or positive thinking when you're ignoring or trying to say everything's great or I'm great, even when maybe that's not the case. What you're saying is you're embracing the pain with warmth, with kindness, with care, with support. And then so not only does that reduce the negative effects of the suffering, but it feels good to feel connected or to feel love or to feel kindness and warmth. And that feeling good that wraps around the pain actually leads to positive effects. And you also mentioned all these misconceptions we have about self-compassion. And these misconceptions tend to be, I found them all around the world, but the main ones tend to be it's going to make you weak, or that it's selfish, or it's going to make you self-indulgent, or that it's going to undermine your motivation, that we need to be like really hard on ourselves, harsh with ourselves to be motivated. All those are, it's just the opposite. So first of all, self-compassion makes you stronger. When you go into battle and you're an ally as opposed to an inner enemy, if you're like, okay, how can I support you? I care about you. It's going to give you more strength to get through. And we know, like, for instance, with combat veterans who've experienced war, which is very traumatic, and they give themselves compassion for what they've experienced as opposed to just saying, just ignoring it, or, you should have done something differently. They're less likely to develop PTSD or contemplate suicide, for instance, as a way to escape their pain. They're more able to function with that support. So it makes you very, very strong. And whether it's war or COVID or any sort of social injustice, self-compassion, having your own back, so to speak, makes you stronger and more able to survive and get through. It helps you care for others. People think it's selfish, right? If you just give and give and give and ignore yourself, yeah, you might be able to be compassionate. It's not true that you need to be self-compassionate before being compassionate to others. That's actually not true empirically. Most people do that. They're genuinely compassionate to others and really hard on themselves. The problem is you'll be depleted. You won't be able to sustain giving the compassion to others if you don't also replenish yourself with compassion. You couple one dry and it'll lead to burnout. So it actually gives you the resources you need to care for others. It's not self-indulgent, right? It's not like just taking a break or taking it easy. Because if you care about yourself, sometimes you need to work hard, or you need to exercise, or you need to do something challenging. And so self-compassion leads to like more exercise, healthier behaviors, taking care of yourself. Self-indulgence is pleasure, short-term pleasure at the expense of long-term harm. Self-compassionate people are about long-term health, right? So that doesn't happen. But the number one block to self-compassion, what we know in the research, is this belief that we need to be harsh with ourselves to motivate change.
Right.
And that it's every culture. I don't know why that is, but it's really ubiquitous. So we need to be, it's like this is saying in kind of Protestant mythology, spare the rod, spoil the child. We need to use harsh discipline to keep a child in line. And first of all, what we know about that is the same thing with ourselves. It gets short-term compliance. Yeah, if you really harshly, maybe like physically punish your child, they'll do what you say, but in the long term, you're undermining their self-confidence. They don't feel loved. They lose faith in themselves. They may stop trying. Same with ourselves. for critical, yeah, it works in the short term, but we develop performance anxiety, we develop fear of failure. It all becomes we try to change because we feel inadequate if we aren't, as opposed to just because we care, we want to achieve, like a positive, loving parent hopefully encourages their child to make a change, not because their child's inadequate, but because they love their child and they want their child to achieve the best. And so what we know, just as an example, we're just publishing, we're trying to get published a study we did where we taught self-compassion to college level athletes. These are really high performers, lots riding on their performance, scholarships, etc. What we found is teaching them self-compassion actually improved their performance. So when they made a mistake or failed in their sport, instead of just saying, oh, I'm a failure, which kind of like takes the air out of them and makes it harder, it's like, okay, well, it happens. What can I learn from this? It doesn't mean that I'm a failure just because I failed. It means, okay, that happened. How can I improve my game? And we actually found that they did improve their sport performance. So all these barriers are actually false. And we know that for sure now with the research, which is great. I mean, that's the nice thing about research is like, okay, we've got data to show that all these fears are unfounded.
That's lovely. And it reminds me, and speaking of research, I remember that, you wanted to more accurately define yourself and Chris Kermer. I know that a big part of individuals who do the self-compassion program benefit from it, and there's outreach to our medical professionals in the field that are, doctors and people that are constantly dealing with care of others. And so, we know of the term compassion fatigue, which often, you're just giving so much and you're not balancing. And like you said, it's not selfish to do that, but you're actually strengthening yourself to be able to give more. And it was more empathy they found in the research that leads to that emptiness. And so with compassion, having self-compassion was actually a tool or construct, that helped continue to build resilience and balance. With that being said, Kristen, we have right now a revolution in Iran. It's past protests. We have a history of 4+ decades of gender apartheid, where the value of women is half of the man. Women are not allowed to, choose what they want to wear. They're divorced. It's awful. It's backwards, and unfortunately, it hasn't. That wasn't the history of Iran. It hasn't. We were quite progressive. It just happened. With a regime that took over that's unfortunately very oppressive, particularly towards women. And I want to thank you. I want to, because there's so many people in the field, but then there's people that walk the talk. And I just want to thank you so much. On October 7th, you made a post, and I was hoping you could speak a little bit more to that and self-compassion. On October 7th, which was the early stages, and there was a lot of silence from a lot of feminists, a lot of people. You shared, for Mahsa Amini, women of Iran, I am not free while any woman is unfree. We see your justified anger being transformed into collective action out of love and truth for a more just world. We stand with you. The fierce energy of anger motivates action and bravery. It spurs to protect ourselves. It provides focus and draws attention to harm. It allows us to speak loudly and authentically when we're being treated unfairly. While wanton rage mindlessly directed at others isn't helpful, the energy of anger can be incredibly useful when properly harnessed for ending unjust systems of oppression. Whew.
Yeah.
It is the deep expression of compassion for ourselves and others. Thank you to all the women of Iran for being shining examples of fierce compassion in action. May you be safe and successful in your fight for justice. Kristin Neff. Wow, I almost feel like to rest in that for a moment. So powerful. And let people who are hearing this, who have been fighting fiercely with all their heart and soul, just to let that sink in. Yeah. Tell me a little bit, Kristin, about your passion for women and why this is so particularly important in systems of patriarchy in the States.
Yeah.
You know, this is a whole new level, level, what's happening in Iran. Speak to us with your wisdom.
Yeah. So, I see in the back of my book, Fierce Self-Compassion was written for women in particular. And so just to, and I'll speak to what I wrote about, my amazing respect for Iranian women in just a moment, but just in terms of what fierce self-compassion is. So compassion has two faces, the tender and the fierce. Tender self-compassion is more about acceptance. We accept ourselves, we accept our emotions. It's more of a warm, gentle, nurturing energy. You might say like prototypically like a parent toward their child. But compassion is not just about acceptance, it's also about taking action. So if suffering is happening, it's not compassionate to, you might accept yourself or accept the fact that you are suffering, but you don't want to accept the causes of the suffering. You want to fight to change the causes of the suffering because you don't want suffering to continue. You want to alleviate it. And so I call this mama bear self-compassion, like that energy of a mother protecting, a mother, if you try to harm a mother's children, she's not going to accept it. She's going to like tear your head off, that fierce energy of protection, of bravery, when you want to keep the people you love safe. And this includes ourselves, keeping ourselves safe, also taking action, and that mama bear, she might like walk for miles, hunting salmon for her bears. There's a lot of like providing, takes energy to provide for the needs, and also to make changes when there are situations or behaviors causing harm, you want to change them. And that's fierce self-compassion. And the reason I wrote it particularly for women is, as you can see what's happening in Iran, but it's the extreme level of something that happens all over the world and it's been happening for thousands of years, the oppression of women. And part of the way women have been oppressed is by saying, okay, women are allowed to be tender, especially toward others, but they aren't allowed to be fierce. They aren't allowed to be angry. We have names for angry women. We don't like women who take action. Even really competent and successful women often like, oh, yeah, she's maybe the CEO of a company, but she's calling her the B word.
Yeah.
Why do we not like really successful, action-oriented women? Because gender role socialization says women are supposed to be one way and men are supposed to be another. And that happened on purpose. Okay, so in other words, the patriarchy doesn't want women to speak up, doesn't want women to get angry, doesn't want women to complain. And so, in the West, it used to be, we only got the vote, but 100 or maybe coming up on, I forget, but it was only recently that we got the vote that we could own our own property, even in the West. And as you say, Iran used to be very progressive. And this is kind of just an unfortunate regression. But the same dynamics, just in a more extreme form, happen everywhere. It's probably, I don't know what's most extreme, but Afghanistan may be even the most intense, but Iran. But it still happens here in a more subtle form, but we have to see the pattern because it's a matter of degree, not category. There's no country in the world that totally treats men and women the same. And action and power are more valued than nurturing or care. And by the way, this also harms men. We need to call this out. The fact that there are men out there that could even do this is because they are harmed by their own gender role socialization.
Mhm.
They aren't allowed to be sensitive. They aren't allowed to be caring. It's seen as a weakness. And that cuts men off from their own soul. I'm just going to say it. Men are in many ways, traditional men, gender role socialization cuts men off from their own loving heart.
Mhm.
That's violence to men as well. But unfortunately, the way it plays out is because they can't access the tenderness in their own heart.
Right.
They project it onto women and under violence against women. It's a sickness. It really is.
Really is, and the injustice of that. And going back to the research in your book, you share that researchers found that the most frequent causes of women's anger, why are they angry, were feelings of helplessness, not being listened to, injustice,
Yes.
uh, uh, irresponsibility on the part of others, and the inability to make changes they wanted. They
Yes.
found that when women suppressed their anger, holding it as physical tension in their body, they after felt powerlessness.
Yes. And it could lead to things like stress or anxiety or high blood pressure. I mean, we should be angry. You know, we should be angry at the way women are being treated around the world. Absolutely. So, like I said, if we just, it depends, but we don't want to just sit with the anger. We don't want to hate anyone because that's just replicating the process. We don't want to say men are bad or men are terrible or, they've been harmed in their own way. But
Absolutely.
nonetheless, we need to be, the anger is an evolved emotion that has a purpose. It suppresses the fear response. It focuses us. It lets us know something is wrong, and it gives us the energy to try to correct what is wrong. As
Mhm.
long as it's aimed at, the situation, it's aimed at injustice as opposed to not being used as a way to dehumanize people or turned inward, because that can lead to depression and stress. But we need to be able to get angry. We should be angry. It's not like when people are in a revolution, you know, great social justice leaders, they're angry at injustice, and that can be harnessed as an energetic force.
I love that. And I love what you shared. And again, going back to this, to your book, because I just like went over pieces of it over and over. I was in Paris, like in the airport. I even went to a bar at one point, had a drink, and I'm like, this is so good. But in preparing for our interview and just letting that soak in, women's anger is the key to being able to protest gender inequality
Yes.
by motivating women to band together to take collective action.
Yes. And
And
that's where the common, yeah, sorry, that's where the common humanity, comes in.
yes,
And then like that post I wrote, like, we stand with you. So in other words, what Iranian women are doing, it's not even just for Iranian women, it's for everyone, including for me, who not haven't experienced as intense the gender inequality, but I can tell you as a woman in academia, I experienced it as well.
absolutely.
So if you feel like you're all alone, it feels like I'm so powerless. But if we all band together, I mean, we are slightly over half of the world's population, right? It just when we stand together, it's a real sense of empowerment.
Absolutely.
Um,
I certainly hope too that it's been, though we, Kristen, thank you. And I'll get back to the point with academia because I know that I know that uh, the academic psychology world is very male dominated, and it has
yeah,
been historically. And you come in with a construct like self-compassion, which is
yeah,
feminine in the
yeah,
sign. So I've thought about that over and
yeah,
and I love to, but I want to like focus the
yeah,
conversation to serve um,
yes,
people that really need it at this time. And but that is
yes,
so valid because your life is a reflection of fighting and
yeah,
continuing to thrive. You're doing phenomenally well. Your research, your books, and so it's not just talk. And so
yeah,
what I just getting back to my train of thought, rewind.
Let's go back to Iranian women and how they can use self-compassion, both tender and fierce, if you want to, if that's where you're going. I don't know, but
Yeah. Oh goodness. Uh, you're talking about, oh yeah, fighting patriarchy. You know what?
yes,
I'm gonna let that go. I'm gonna practice some self-compassion. I lost that, but
that's
maybe
okay.
it'll come back. But um, what's oh goodness, what I want to know is right now for our advocates, uh,
Yes.
we are experiencing fatigue, and there's two levels, and I just if you can take some time to speak into that. So there are dissidents like myself. There are dysphoria.
Yes.
I am Canadian. I grew up here, but
Uh,
I am of Iranian origin. So, we experience certain levels of trauma leaving. And so this is a hopeful, inspiring time for us, at the same time, very difficult.
yes.
Currently there's executions taking place. Women are being raped, oh goodness, in prisons as an act of suppression. Children are being killed. It's barbaric in the way that they are trying to suppress. And the good news is that there is a lot of progress, and there's a lot of hope, and more of the world is coming. And I thank you so much. And I'm going back to my train of thought came back is that uh, your words, you share that common humanity, and half the globe is women, and coming together and supporting one another. And it has been quite slow uh, outside of Iranians. It is the first awakening of this type in the 4 decades of the Islamic oppression in Iran. It's the first time there has been such a collective unity of men, women coming together. And to date, like even a couple of days ago, a lot of our leaders coming together. Um, if you're listening, and you're a woman out there who is justice loving, who believes in the work of feminism, of equality, of ending gender apartheid, I certainly hope that we have more people like you to just recognize how important this is. It's not just for the women in Iran, it's for women everywhere, men everywhere, and it's for democracy having a voice. It's a woman-led revolution, historic. And I just there and it's still very quiet. Crickets are going from uh, across academia, across many places. So I want to thank you so much, uh, first of all, for doing the work that you do, the research that you do. There is an implication of a self transformation, and then within groups and community. And then really it's at a part where we're discussing now in the interview, how do we make our world a better place? And MSc, Mindful Self-Compassion, the program is phenomenal, and there's no religious, there's no political per se attachment to it, that people can engage with and improve their well-being. Particularly now for we're at a point right now that many of our advocates, it's been so difficult for us emotionally, mentally. And if you can speak into um, perhaps harnessing the power of self-compassion, any research, because this is going to be a marathon. It's not progressive change, doesn't happen overnight. And there are people in the front lines, human rights activists that I'm speaking with you with, uh, people in politics, everyday moms. Everyone's like, just trying to get on social media, do their best. And what words of wisdom can you speak into the situation, and finding balance, and finding room for self-care and dealing with what we should call the empathy fatigue, not compassion fatigue.
Yeah. So
In
I'm going to stop you just because there's
Thank
a
you.
lot
Yes,
there.
yeah,
So
there's a
yeah,
lot.
let me just
Yes, cut me off, Kristin.
okay, yeah.
Thank
So there's a lot of ways that self-compassion is absolutely essential. It's essential. It's not a luxury. It's essential in so many ways, both the tender and the fierce.
Yes.
Okay, so remember, the tender is more the warm, accepting, nurturing, loving, caring side of self-compassion, and the fierce is more the taking action to protect, the mama bear. So mother and mama bear, we need both. And so for people who are victims of injustice, for the women actually experience this in Iran, and other women like you are just feeling it. I mean, I feel it, but you really feel it, right? So
Right.
there's so much pain and grief and sadness, and then also, physical pain as well for many people. I mean, there's just the level of pain and suffering is enormous. And so that we need the tender self-compassion to try to hold that. Okay, it's not going to make it go away. It's not, it's maybe not even make it better. Hopefully we'll make it from being in this negative spiral. But so the tender self-compassion is allowing our hearts to be as wide as the world. The Sharon Salzberg book, hearts as wide as the world. Our hearts have to be really big to be able to hold the pain of it. And so especially, in terms of what happens historically is for women, we've internalized it. Okay, yeah, we are less worthy. And we've kind of bought into the BS. Oh yeah, maybe I am less worthy. So holding the pain of that and not allowing ourselves to internalize that message that we are less worthy, we are valuable, we are precious, and holding the pain of the suffering as a victim of oppression, also as someone helping those who are victims of oppression, the burnout, holding the pain of it, the grief, the empathic distress of it.
Yeah.
Again, our hearts have to be as wide as the world to hold that.
Yeah.
And it helps to think not so much like you are creating the compassion, because how am I to have the heart as big as the world? I'm just a little me. And that's where we let go of this idea of separation. If you are spiritual, you can think of it as God or or you can just think of it as awareness. It's this ocean of compassion that is the world. That's what we tap into. We need to tap into this love that's larger than ourselves to hold the incredible pain of it. Okay, so we need the tenderness to hold the pain, but then we also need the fierceness to, again, to fight against these messages, to fight against the messages. And by the way, this also could apply to racism as well as sexism or any form of oppression. There's holding the pain of oppression. There's also the fierceness to fight against the messages which are untrue, which are designed to keep you down. To allow yourself to fully welcome your anger at the injustice, to give yourself the energy to do as much as you can. That's safe. And by the way, we have to remember safety. With self-compassion, it's not like sometimes it's not safe for women to speak up. If they're going to be physically harmed, it's not safe to speak up. And it's not like, it's amazing the bravery of the women that are doing that. But we don't want to think that everyone should be speaking up. If it's not safe, it may not be the most self-compassionate thing to do, but at least inside, you know that it's wrong and you know that you are worthy. And it's just right now you're choosing not to say anything as an act of love for yourself, but you don't buy the BS.
Right.
That's the thing that really kills us when we internalize it. Then when the opportunity arises, we don't rise up because, well, we're just less worthy. You know what I mean? But just to make that clear, you also have to be safe and smart about how you do it, right? So there's fighting injustice, there's the pain of the burnout of helping people who are fighting injustice, there's the pain of injustice itself. And I'm just going to put in here for any men that may be listening, there's also holding the pain of maybe contributing to the injustice, and women as well. Women have contributed by Like, for instance, just to say, because women have internalized these messages that men are, you know, kind of more valuable, and that women shouldn't be too strong. So women kind of help perpetuate it because we've internalized it. So women, even more than men, are less likely to like strong, powerful women. Isn't that interesting? Because we've internalized these unconscious biases. Or if you look at racism, me as a white person, I need self-compassion to hold the pain of being part of a system in which I've unfairly benefited. Right. So like, any way you look at it, and from any angle, you need fierce and tender self-compassion. Again, it's absolutely essential.
That's
In addition, of course, compassion for others.
what I'm hearing, Kristin, is that by practicing self-compassion, we could actually alleviate some of the suffering and hold the pain
Yeah.
instead of shutting it out, or
Yes.
instead of shutting ourselves out to the world, because that's the second part of
Yes.
what I'm hearing from others, that, you know what, like, I can't do, like, someone's being hung, this is pretty extreme, and it's a, instinctively talked though, it's a reality happening. This is why women are angry. This is why there
Yeah.
is a revolution. And or like, it bothers me so much that there's so much injustice, I'm going to tune it out. And it sounds to me that, and of course, then there's no progress made, then we become maybe ineffective at being able to make change. And so at the
Can I
same
just
time, at the same
interject here?
yeah,
I just want to interject. And by the way, that may be an act of self-compassion.
yes,
It's not self-compassion just to let in all the pain.
yes, absolutely.
And so you may have to tune out just to survive, but not tune out so much that nothing is done.
Exactly.
Right? It's a matter of balance. Yeah.
Absolutely, Kristen. I was gonna get to that because, on one extreme, it's like, you tune out, and you want nothing to do with it. And on the other extreme, you're
Yeah.
so engaged and you're not taking a break. And that's what's
Yeah.
happening. And so
Yeah.
absolutely, it might be compassionate to close at
Yes.
some points, that you really need to, because it's too much.
Yes.
At the same time, for those people that want to engage but need to find and build the skills for some kind of balance to help them in the
Yes.
longevity moving forward,
Yes.
how do you cultivate that?
Yeah. So one of the things you do with self-compassion practice is you learn not to so much focus on what's happening, but how you're relating to what's happening. Right. So what's happening may be incredibly painful, incredibly, overwhelmingly painful, so much so that maybe self-compassionate not to let it all in. But the way you're holding it, you might say the love and the care holding the pain, you can let your awareness rest there.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you're focused on these feelings of love and care for the grief and the suffering and the sorrow, then that love isn't so draining. That love is actually replenishing. And so it's kind of like, instead of the contents of what you're aware of, you're really focusing more on the quality of the awareness itself. And that's the way you don't get so overwhelmed by it. And that's the way you kind of stay in the game more.
I see. So it's kind of finding that middle ground of balance between the yin and the yang, between becoming aware and
Yeah, so the yin and the yang is more about the fierce and the tender. So we need that. We need to balance fierce and tender. So if we're too fierce without being tender, might be aggressive. But if
yeah,
we're too tender without being fierce, we may be complacent. So there's that balance. But what I'm talking about is a little bit differently.
okay.
So like right now, if you think of some of the pain associated with what's happening in Iran, okay? So you think about that, and when we're aware of what's happening, it's so painful, almost too painful. But then you can focus on the love of caring, you know, like, I'm so sorry this is happening. But instead of focusing so much on the fact that, you know, what's happening, that I can't do anything about it, just focus on the love, because that feeling of being overwhelmed comes from the fact that you care so much.
I see.
Because your heart hurts. So, but you focus on the feeling of the love, you know, and the love that doesn't want this to be happening. The love itself is beautiful and connecting. And actually, there's a certain peacefulness in the love that's holding the pain. So it's like the quality of your awareness itself. I mean, I believe this isn't really scientific, that we're getting more into the realms of the spiritual here, but I think they shouldn't be totally separate. The quality of awareness itself is loving and peaceful. It's like the ocean that holds these waves, these crashing waves that are rising. The ocean itself is loving and peaceful, even though what's happening in that ocean of awareness may be really traumatic and even horrific. So instead of just being so, you know, we need to be aware of what's happening because we need to make sure we do something about it. But instead of being totally sucked into what's happening, allow yourself to feel the love and that peace of the awareness itself, in which you're aware of what's happening. Does that make sense? I know it sounds a little vague, but
I know that you're very good at like being experimental, like in your programs, and
because it is it's not just an idea, because ideas are in our head and ideas are important and they're useful. But you know, we're always aware, aren't we? Are you aware now? Yes. Am I aware? Yes. Yeah. I'm aware now. And so if you sink into the loving, peaceful quality of awareness itself, this is our refuge.
yes,
You know, and this is what could replenish us and which keeps us from being totally overwhelmed.
it sounds to me like when there's that moment where you need to tune out perhaps or close, when there's lots of media, and
Yes.
you know, maybe taking a moment and practicing that.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is so difficult for you.
Yes.
I know that you love justice so much that it's so painful because this is.
Yes. Yes.
And that act of self-compassion, does that help to keep your heart still open and not
Yes.
down?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's the love that's holding the pain that is what keeps you in the game. It keeps you from going into this negative spiral, make things worse. So I write in my book a lot about my son who has autism, and you know, it's a different type of pain, obviously, but you know, it was really hard, especially when he was younger, when he had terrible tantrums. He wasn't potty trained till he was 5. It was difficult. It was really difficult. And so and luckily I have my self-compassion practice. And so I learned to do that, even in the worst moments, like he's tantruming, he's pooed his pants, he's 4 years old. It's like just feeling totally, you know, hopeless, and, you know, will he ever drive, and just all this stuff happening. I actually learned to rest my awareness in the love and the care and the compassion that was kind of holding all of the pain of what was actually happening. And that's what got me through. And believe it or not, I could actually find love and peace in those moments.
Beautiful. It
You know,
wasn't the guilt. It wasn't that, and I'm not doing enough. Oh, I should be doing more. People are
but,
like,
and all those thoughts arise, and all those thoughts will arise. And again, so we don't want to like just be in the loving awareness and not do anything,
sure.
because we do care. And so but you know, you do what you can when you can. And including, so this is going to be weird. We can be angry,
Tell
but
me.
what's aware of that anger? The awareness of the anger is arising. You're harnessing that anger. You're using it as
Yes.
mama bear to, but that part of us that's aware of the anger is actually pretty peaceful.
Yeah. Noticing and labeling this. I am angry, and observing the anger.
But see, the awareness, my work's probably because I actually retired from UT Austin last year, and
Oh, you did. Sorry.
I
I'll
did
update
it.
it. I'll correct the
No,
introduction.
I'm still in. I still have my title. I'm a modified status, which basically means I don't get paid, but I'm still doing research. I'm still officially a professor, but I'm not doing as much time. I'm not teaching classes, for instance. And I think more and more I'm drawn to, and this is part of the self-compassion work, this thing about really understanding, the nature of the awareness, the consciousness, the love, the peace that is this experience of self-compassion itself.
Yeah.
Self-compassion is like the loving embrace, or even maybe the firm supportive embrace of the pain. And you really can learn to just pay more attention to that. We're so absorbed into what's happening. We forget about, well, what's the quality of our awareness in terms of how we're relating to what's happening?
Yes.
And for when things are really tough like this, this is also, I think, where spiritual practice comes in. I think it can be a real help. And, obviously religion can be used as a form of oppression. It has been throughout history, especially for women. But the heart of that religion, which is love, oneness, interconnectedness, that can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that being being, of course, this is really a difficult and tough time, and there's anger and just anger. There's a lot of emotions that are difficult arising, helplessness, maybe hopelessness. And there's there's a number of things we can do to continue use mindful self-compassion to stay in the game. That is, on one end, becoming aware of what we're experiencing.
Yes.
And engaging with ourselves in a caring and kind way that continues to build our inner resilience and feeds us.
Yes.
And supports us, so that we don't shut out, don't get overwhelmed. And behind those emotions, as we cultivate deeper practices of mindfulness, we can notice the emotion and observe it and recognize a more nurturing and supportive emotion of love behind that. Why am I angry?
Yes.
Because I love justice. It's because I love equality.
Yes.
Because I believe in women, life, and freedom.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And it's really helpful when we do this. Again, so not only does it keep us from just spiraling into depression and hopelessness or helplessness, or the type of anger that's disconnecting, as opposed to the type of anger which is, again, coming from the love of justice. But it actually is, this is where the meaning, from my point of view, where the meaning of life is, right? Compassion, love, interconnectedness, oneness. I think for a lot of people, this is really what they value. Why do we love justice? Because we know at the end of the day, we're all one, right? And so when you start going there, it's like, okay, yeah, I can handle this. Because it's not just me, it's us.
Amazing. That's beautiful. And I thank you so much, Kristin, for joining me today. I thank you so much for your 20 years of research in the same direction.
Yes.
Going through glass ceilings as a female researcher in male academia, for opening your heart and building the capacity to hold the suffering of various groups that are experiencing oppression, and also supporting women to thrive. It doesn't stop at the suffering. We continue to flourish through it. Chris Germer, and is the Fierce Compassion program developed with you and Chris?
Yeah. So just if people, you can take online the Mindful Self-Compassion program through the Center for MSE.
Yes.
And as an advanced program, you have to take the normal program first because it kind of builds the foundations. But just this year, we're launching an 8-week Fierce Self-Compassion program, which hopefully you'll take, which kind of really gets into the skills of the fierceness, like working with anger, working with that energy of providing or motivating or protecting. And that is going to be, is actually, I think they're already scheduled, and you can, or if they aren't scheduled yet, they will be very soon, but that's rolling. We pilot tested it. It works really well. And that we'll be rolling that out this year. So you can take it through the centerformse.org. Centerformse.org is the website.
Beautiful. And they're nonprofit. So
yes, nonprofit. Yeah.
For that. Well, thank you so much. Again, today was my birthday, and I scheduled you
specifically
happy
birthday.
My birthday as a gift. Thank you for making a meaningful impact in my own life and continue to do the work that you do. It's really appreciated, Kristin.
Thank you, Bita, and thank you for your book. Sorry, not your book, your work. Maybe your book hasn't come yet, but your work. Thank you for your work.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Bye.